Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
Rowena Maddox set her coffee cup down with deliberate precision. The invitation lay beside her laptop, cream cardstock with Marilee's flowing script. Family brunch this Sunday. Important matters to discuss. And no mention of what matters. No mention of who else would attend. Just the assumption that Rowena would drop everything and appear. She picked up her phone and dialed. "Kasha, it's me. Let me guess. The in-laws are circling again." Rowena's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Kasha Price had been her closest friend since college, and 14 years of friendship had taught Kasha to read between the lines. Marilee wants a family meeting. She's calling it brunch. Since when does Marilee do casual brunches? Never. Which is why I need you to dig into Harlan's finances. Something's coming, and I want to know what it is before I walk into that house. Kasha's voice sharpened. What kind of digging? Everything. Bank records, credit applications, business filings. Use your compliance contacts if you need to. How deep do you want me to go? Rowena walked to her office window, looking out at the Charleston morning. The historic district spread below her, all brick and wrought iron and carefully maintained facades. Like her marriage, beautiful on the surface, rotting underneath. All the way down, Kasha. If Harlan's planning something, I want to know about it before he makes his move. I'll start with the business loan databases. Those are public record if you know where to look. Good. Call me when you find something. Rowena hung up and returned to her laptop. The spice company's quarterly reports needed her attention, but her mind kept drifting to that invitation. Marilee Maddox never did anything without calculation. Every social gathering was a chess move. Every family dinner a strategic play. 3 hours later, Kasha called back. Found something. You're not going to like it. Tell me. Harlan applied for a business loan 2 weeks ago. $500,000. He listed projected shared marital assets as collateral. Rowena's hand tightened on the phone. Projected assets. Based on your inheritance. He claimed it would become community property upon approval of a family trust restructuring. The words hit Rowena like ice water. Her grandfather's inheritance was legally separate property, protected by prenuptial agreement and careful financial segregation. Harlan knew this. They'd discussed it during their engagement. He can't do that. The inheritance is separate property. I know that, and you know that. But loan officers don't always understand inheritance law. If he presented it right with the right legal language, he could get approval pending trust execution. Rowena closed her eyes. The pieces were falling into place. The sudden family meeting. The formal invitation. Harlan had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. How much debt does he have? Papers rustled on Kasha's end. His tech startup folded 6 months ago. He's got $200,000 in business debt, another $100 in personal loans, and his credit cards are maxed out. He's drowning, Rowena. And he thinks my inheritance is his life raft. Looks like it. There's more. Duke's Outdoor Goods Company is also in trouble. Filed for emergency credit restructuring last month. If I had to guess, this is a family-wide financial crisis. Rowena set the phone down and walked to her grandfather's photograph on the wall. Thomas Beckett had built the spice company from nothing, survived the war, and left her everything because he'd trusted her to protect what he'd built. He'd also taught her never to forgive betrayal. Betrayal isn't a mistake, Rowena, he told her when she was 16 and crying over a friend who'd spread her secrets. It's a choice, and people who betray you once will do it again if you let them. She picked up the phone. Kasha, I need you to document everything you found. Every loan application, every debt record, every financial filing. Already printing it out. What's your plan? I'm going to that brunch, but not alone. Harlan arrived home that evening with takeout from their favorite restaurant and a bottle of wine. He kissed her cheek, his lips lingering longer than usual. "How was your day?" he asked, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "Productive. I got your mother's invitation." His movements stilled for just a moment. "Right. Sunday brunch. Should be nice." Rowena opened the takeout containers, her movements calm and methodical. What kind of important matters does she want to discuss? Just family stuff. You know how she likes to keep everyone connected. She looked at him directly. "Family stuff like your loan application." The color drained from his face. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Harlan's expression shifted, becoming defensive. "How do you know about that? Does it matter how I know? The question is why you listed my inheritance as collateral without talking to me first." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd once found endearing. Now it looked calculated, practiced. "I was going to tell you. I just needed to see if it was even possible first. It was just preliminary approval, Rowena. Nothing binding. Preliminary approval for $500,000 using assets that don't belong to you. They're marital assets." "No, they're not. We signed a prenup. We kept our finances separate. You know this." Harlan's face hardened. "We've been married for 8 years. Don't you think it's time we started acting like a real partnership?" "Partnership doesn't mean I hand over my inheritance so you can pay off your business debts." "It's not just about the debts." He moved closer, his voice softening into the tone he used when he wanted something. "I'm trying to build something for us, for our future, but I can't do it alone." "You want to build something? Start with honesty." "I am being honest." His voice rose slightly. "We're married, Rowena. You've got a mountain of money sitting in accounts doing nothing, and I'm drowning. Don't you believe in partnership?" She studied his face, seeing the desperation he was trying to hide behind charm and guilt. This was the moment he'd been building toward, probably for months. The careful manipulation, the appeals to duty and love and marriage. "I believe in a lot of things, Harlan, but I don't believe in being played." She walked past him toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" "To pack for Sunday, since we're apparently doing this." "Rowena, wait." She turned back to look at him. "What?" "I love you. Everything I'm doing for us." The words should have meant something. Once they would have. Now they sounded hollow, rehearsed. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have tried to steal from me." She climbed the stairs, leaving him standing in the kitchen with his takeout and his lies. Sunday morning arrived gray and humid, typical Charleston weather in late summer. Rowena dressed carefully a navy dress that was professional without being intimidating, pearls her grandfather had given her, shoes she could run in if necessary. She met Kasia at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Marilee's house. "You look like you're going to war," Kasia observed, sliding into the booth across from her. "I am." Rowena opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Everything's in here. Every document I could find. Loan applications, debt records, credit reports. It's all legally obtained through public records and my compliance contacts. And Judge Beckett. She'll be there. She's not happy about the family manipulation angle, but she wants to see this play out." Rowena nodded. Lorna Beckett had been her grandfather's close friend and had taught Rowena the basics of business law in her 20s. If anyone would understand the legal implications of what Harlan was trying to do, it was Lorna. Ready. They drove to Marilee's house in separate cars. The Maddox family home sat on a tree-lined street in the historic district, 3 stories of brick and white columns that spoke of old money and older expectations. Rowena had never felt welcome here, not in 8 years of marriage. She knocked on the front door at exactly 11 o'clock. Marilee opened it with her practiced smile. "Rowena, darling. Right on time." "Where's everyone else?" In the dining room. Come on back. The dining room had been transformed. Instead of a brunch setup, there was a long mahogany table surrounded by chairs. Harlan sat at one end, looking uncomfortable. Duke paced by the windows, his face flushed with what might have been anger or alcohol. Two men in suits sat across from each other, briefcases open, documents spread between them. "What is this?" Rowena asked, though she already knew. "Just a family meeting," merrily said, her voice honey-sweet. "We have some exciting opportunities to discuss." One of the lawyers stood. "Mrs. Maddox, I'm Robert Chin from Chen, Williams and Associates. We've prepared some documents for your review." He slid a thick binder across the table. The tab read Maddox Family Trust, Preliminary Agreement. Rowena looked at the binder but didn't touch it. "A family trust?" "Just to protect the legacy," merrily said, settling into her chair like a queen holding court. "With all the uncertainty in the world, it makes sense to consolidate our resources, pool our strengths." Duke stopped pacing. "It's a smart move, Rowena. Tax benefits, legal protection, shared oversight. Everyone wins." "Shared oversight," Rowena repeated. "Meaning?" The second lawyer cleared his throat. "The trust would be managed by a board of trustees. In this case, the family members who contribute assets. Decisions would be made collectively." "And who would be on this board?" "Well, you and Harlan, of course. Duke and Marilee as senior family members. It's all very collaborative." Rowena opened the binder and skimmed the first few pages. The legal language was dense, but the intent was clear. Her inheritance would be placed into the trust, with Harlan as co-executor. Major financial decisions would require board approval, but day-to-day management would fall to the executors. "This gives Harlan control over my inheritance." "Not control," Marilee corrected. "Partnership. You're the newest Maddox, dear. We trust you'll do what's right for the family." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Rowena closed the binder and looked around the table. Harlan wouldn't meet her eyes. Duke was watching her with naked greed. The lawyers waited with professional patience. "It's funny," she said finally. "I brought someone too." The front door opened on cue. Kasia walked in, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, followed by Judge Lorna Beckett. Marilee's smile faltered. "I don't understand." "Lorna, everyone. Everyone, Judge Lorna Beckett. She's here in her capacity as a legal advisor." Lorna's presence filled the room immediately. At 58, she carried herself with the authority of someone who'd spent decades making difficult decisions. Her gray hair was pulled back severely, and her dark eyes took in the scene with sharp intelligence. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying the weight of the courtroom. "I understand there's been some discussion about trust management and asset consolidation." The lawyers exchanged glances. Duke's face had gone pale. "Your Honor," one of them stammered, "we weren't expecting—" "No, I imagine you weren't." Lorna pulled out a chair and sat down without invitation. "Please continue. I'd very much like to hear about this family trust proposal." Kasia set her laptop on the table and opened it with deliberate calm. The screen filled the room with blue light, and she clicked through several windows before finding what she needed. "Before we discuss trust structures," she said, "I think everyone should hear something." She clicked play on an audio file. Harlan's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. "If I can get her to sign, we'll move fast. Once the trust is set up, I can redirect it. She won't know what hit her." Another voice responded Duke's. "You sure she'll go for it?" "She trusts me. Or she did. Either way, once it's legal, it's legal. The trust gives me access to everything." "What about the prenup?" "The trust supersedes the prenup. New legal structure, new rules. By the time she realizes what happened, it'll be too late to stop it." The recording stopped. Silence stretched across the room like a held breath. Harlan's face had gone white. Where did you get that? Does it matter? Rowena's voice was steady, controlled. The question is whether you meant every word. That was taken out of context. What context makes it acceptable to steal from your wife? Duke slammed his hand on the table. Nobody's stealing anything. This is family business. No, Judge Beckett said, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. This is fraud. She stood and walked to the head of the table, her presence commanding immediate attention. What I just heard constitutes evidence of intentional deception with the purpose of financial gain. The legal term is fraudulent inducement. One of the lawyers started to protest. Your Honor, family financial planning is not family financial planning. Fraud. Lorna's eyes swept the room. Let me explain the legal consequences of what you've attempted here today. She began counting on her fingers. First, coercion, using family pressure and emotional manipulation to force someone to sign legal documents. Second, fraudulent intent. The recorded conversation proves deliberate deception about the trust's purpose and management. Third, attempted conversion of separate property. Mrs. Maddox's inheritance is legally protected by prenuptial agreement and South Carolina inheritance law. Marilee's face had hardened into sharp lines. Now see here. I'm not finished. Lorna's voice could have frozen water. The attempted loan application using assets that don't belong to him could constitute identity fraud. The coordinated family pressure constitutes conspiracy, and the recorded admission of intent to redirect assets through legal manipulation is evidence of planned theft. She turned to the lawyers. Gentlemen, I suggest you leave. Immediately. Your continued presence here could implicate you in this conspiracy. The lawyers packed their briefcases with unseemly haste and left without another word. Duke's face was purple now. You can't prove any of this. Kasia smiled and turned her laptop around. The screen showed a comprehensive financial report, bank records, credit applications, and debt statements. Actually, we can prove all of it. Harlan's loan application, Duke's bankruptcy filings, the coordinated timing of this trust proposal. It's all documented. Rowena stood slowly, her movements controlled and precise. She looked at each family member in turn merrily with her shattered composure, Duke with his desperate anger, and finally Harlan with his crumbling lies. You people thought I'd be naive because I loved one of you. You were wrong. She picked up her purse and nodded to Kasia and Judge Beckett. We're done here. As they walked toward the door, Harlan found his voice. Rowena, wait. Please. She turned back, her expression empty of any warmth. What? I never meant for it to go this far. The business, the debts, I panicked. But I love you. That part was real. Love doesn't steal, Harlan. It doesn't lie and it doesn't conspire. What you did today wasn't love. It was betrayal. Everyone makes mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And I don't forgive choices like that. She walked out of the house and didn't look back. 3 days later, Rowena received legal papers. Harlan had filed a petition for community interest in her inherited assets, claiming she had used marital funds to maintain inherited property, thereby converting separate property into community property. She read through the petition while drinking her morning coffee, her expression never changing. When she finished, she set the papers aside and picked up her phone. Kasia, he filed. The community property petition. Yes, just like we expected. Are you worried? Rowena walked to her filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder labeled Inheritance Financial Records. Inside were 8 years of meticulous documentation. Every expense related to her inherited assets had been paid from a separate account, funded entirely by inheritance money. Every tax payment, insurance premium, maintenance cost, and improvement had been carefully segregated from their marital finances. No, I'm not worried. She'd learned from her grandfather that preparation was everything. When he'd left her the inheritance, he'd also left detailed instructions about protecting it. Keep separate accounts. Document everything. Never commingle assets. Trust no one with access to what you can't afford to lose. He's going to argue that 8 years of marriage created an expectation of shared assets, Kasia said. Let him argue. I have 8 years of bank records that prove otherwise. What about emotional damages? He might claim that your secrecy about finances damaged the marriage. The prenup addressed that. Both parties acknowledged separate property rights. He can't claim ignorance now. Rowena hung up and returned to the legal papers. Harlan's attorney had crafted a sophisticated argument, but it was built on a false foundation. Every claim could be disproved with documentation. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. This is Rowena. Mrs. Maddox, this is Detective Ray Harrison with Charleston PD. I need to ask you some questions about your business. Ice formed in her stomach. What kind of questions? We received a complaint about potential health code violations at your spice manufacturing facility. Anonymous tip suggested contamination issues. We'll need to schedule an inspection. Of course. When? This afternoon, if possible. The complaint mentioned imminent public health risk. After she hung up, Rowena sat in her office, staring at the wall. One legal challenge would have been predictable. A health department investigation on the same week felt like coordination. She called her facility manager. Tom, we're getting a health inspection this afternoon. Anonymous complaint about contamination. Contamination? That's impossible. We just passed our quarterly inspection last month. I know, but they're coming anyway. Make sure everything is perfect. And Tom, check the supplier deliveries from this week. If anything looks off, quarantine it immediately. You think someone's trying to frame us? I think someone's trying to destroy us, but they picked the wrong target. The inspection took 3 hours. The investigators found nothing wrong, but Rowena noticed they spent a long time photographing her employee records and supplier contracts. Information that could be useful to someone planning to interfere with her business operations. That evening, 2 of her key suppliers called to cancel their contracts. Emergency restructuring, they claimed. Nothing personal, just business decisions. Rowena hung up from the second call and opened her laptop. She began documenting everything. The health complaint, the inspection timing, the supplier cancellations, the legal petition. Someone was executing a coordinated attack on both her personal and business assets. She opened a new document and began typing. Timeline of harassment and interference evidence log. Every incident would be recorded. Every connection documented. When this was over, she would have a complete picture of what they'd tried to do to her, and then she would make them pay for it. The sabotage escalated over the next 2 weeks. First, it was small things. Shipments delayed. Orders mysteriously canceled. Computer glitches that crashed her inventory system at critical moments. Then Rowena discovered that her assistant, Jennifer, had been copying files to a flash drive after hours. She'd suspected something was wrong when Jennifer started staying late without being asked, always volunteering to lock up the office. The security cameras revealed the truth. Jennifer would wait until the building was empty, then access Rowena's computer and copy files to an external drive. Rowena confronted her the next morning. How long have you been selling information about my business? Jennifer's face crumpled. I don't know what you mean. Security footage shows you copying files to a flash drive multiple times over the past 3 weeks. I was just backing up important documents. At 10 o'clock at night, without authorization. Rowena's voice was calm, but her eyes were ice. How much did they pay you? Jennifer started crying. $500. I needed the money for my daughter's school fees. I didn't think it would hurt anything. What kind of information did they want? Customer lists, supplier contracts, financial records. They said they were doing a business analysis. Who's they? A man named Duke something. He said you were all family, and it was for a family business review. Rowena closed her eyes for a moment. Duke. Of course it was Duke. Clear out your desk. You're terminated immediately. Please, Mrs. Maddox. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Betrayal is a choice, Jennifer. You chose money over loyalty. Now live with the consequences. After Jennifer left, Rowena called her IT consultant to secure all computer systems and change every password. Then she called her attorney to draft cease and desist letters. Finally, she opened her evidence log and added another entry. Employee bribery and corporate espionage evidence. Security footage, employee admission, payment records. The pattern was becoming clear. They were attacking her from multiple angles: legal challenges to her inheritance, harassment of her business operations, and theft of proprietary information. It was a coordinated campaign designed to pressure her into submission, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated her that afternoon. Rowena drove to her grandfather's grave. The cemetery was quiet, Spanish moss hanging from ancient oak trees like gray curtains. She knelt beside the headstone and placed a small arrangement of herbs from her garden: rosemary for remembrance, sage for wisdom, thyme for courage. They think they can break me, Grandpa. They think if they hit me from enough directions, I'll fold. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of jasmine and the distant ocean. But you taught me better than that. You taught me that some fights are worth having, even if they cost everything, especially if they cost everything. She stood and brushed dirt from her knees. I'm going to finish this, and when I'm done, they're going to wish they'd never heard my name. That evening, Rowena worked until midnight building her case file. Every piece of evidence was photographed, documented, and cross-referenced. Every incident was time-stamped and cataloged. Every connection between the various attacks was mapped out in detail. When she finally closed the laptop, she had a complete picture of the conspiracy against her. Harlan's legal petition, Duke's corporate espionage, the coordinated supplier harassment, the anonymous health complaints. It was all connected, all part of the same campaign. Tomorrow she would begin fighting back, but tonight she would plan. 6 weeks later, Rowena sat at the plaintiff's table in the Charleston County Courthouse, watching Harlan's attorney present his case. The lawyer was young, expensive-looking, and confident. He spoke about the sanctity of marriage, the reasonable expectations of spousal partnership, and the emotional damages caused by financial secrecy. Your Honor, my client entered this marriage with the understanding that they would build a life together. Instead, he discovered that his wife had created a fortress around her assets, shutting him out of any meaningful financial partnership. Rowena's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Webb, took notes but didn't object. They'd prepared for this argument. Furthermore, Harlan's lawyer continued, the evidence will show that Mrs. Maddox used marital resources to maintain and improve her inherited properties, thereby converting separate property into community property under South Carolina law. The judge, a tired-looking man in his 60s, listened without expression. Judge Mills had a reputation for disliking emotional manipulation in his courtroom. When it was Patricia's turn, she stood with quiet confidence. Your Honor, Mrs. Maddox will demonstrate that she has meticulously maintained the separate nature of her inherited assets throughout their marriage. Every expense, every improvement, every maintenance cost has been paid from inheritance funds, never from marital resources. She gestured to Kasia, who began setting up a laptop and projector. We will also show that Mr. Maddox's petition is part of a coordinated campaign of harassment and intimidation designed to coerce Mrs. Maddox into surrendering her legal rights. Kasia clicked through a presentation showing bank records, canceled checks, and financial statements. 8 years of documentation proving that Rowena's inherited assets had never been commingled with marital funds. As you can see, Your Honor, Mrs. Maddox has been extraordinarily careful to maintain separation. She has separate bank accounts, separate credit cards, separate insurance policies. Even the property taxes on inherited real estate have been paid from inheritance funds. The judge leaned forward, studying the financial records. These are remarkably detailed records, Mrs. Webb. My client learned from her grandfather the importance of documentation, Your Honor. He taught her that assets worth protecting are worth protecting properly. Patricia nodded to Kasia, who clicked to the next screen. This one showed the timeline of harassment, the health department complaints, the supplier cancellations, the employee bribery, the coordinated legal challenges. Now, Your Honor, we come to the real issue. This petition isn't about community property rights. It's about financial coercion. She pressed play on the audio recording they'd made at Marilee's house. Harlan's voice filled the courtroom. If I can get her to sign, we'll move fast. Once the trust is set up, I can redirect it. She won't know what hit her. Harlan's face went pale. His attorney looked stunned. That recording was made without consent. In South Carolina, Your Honor, only one party need consent to record conversation. Mrs. Maddox consented to recording her own conversation. Patricia clicked to the next exhibit photographs of the forged loan documents. Finally, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Maddox attempted to use his wife's assets as collateral for business loans without her knowledge or consent. The loan applications contain what appear to be forged signatures. She handed a folder to the judge. We've had the signatures analyzed by a certified handwriting expert. The report concludes that Mrs. Maddox did not sign these documents. Judge Mills examined the documents carefully. Mr. Patterson, he said to Harlan's lawyer, do you have any explanation for these loan applications? Patterson whispered urgently with his client, then stood. Your Honor, my client maintains that he had verbal authorization to forge his wife's signature. Not forge, Your Honor. Sign on her behalf based on marital authority. There's no such thing as automatic marital signature authority in South Carolina, Counselor. You should know that. Patricia stood again. Your Honor, we believe this evidence demonstrates a pattern of fraud, coercion, and harassment. We request that Mr. Maddox's petition be dismissed with prejudice, and that the court refer this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. The judge sat back in his chair, his expression grim. I've seen many community property disputes, but I've never seen anything quite like this. Mr. Patterson, your client's case is not just weak, it appears to be built on criminal activity. He looked directly at Harlan. Sir, did you attempt to obtain loans using assets that don't belong to you? Harlan stood shakily. Your Honor, I was desperate. My business was failing and I thought. You thought you could steal from your wife. It wasn't stealing. We're married. Marriage is not a license to commit fraud, sir. The judge turned back to Patricia. Mrs. Webb, I'm prepared to rule on this matter immediately. Do you have any final arguments? Only this, Your Honor. Mrs. Maddox has been the victim of a sustained campaign of financial abuse. She's been threatened, harassed, and betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect her. She asks only that the court protect her legal rights and hold the perpetrators accountable. Judge Mills nodded. The court finds that Mr. Maddox's petition is without merit and appears to be part of a fraudulent scheme to obtain assets through deception. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. He turned to Harlan. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible criminal fraud. The court also awards Mrs. Maddox her reasonable attorney's fees and costs. The gavel came down with finality. 3 months later, the consequences of the Maddox family scheme had rippled through Charleston social circles like stones thrown in still water. Harlan faced 5 felony fraud charges. The district attorney had been thorough, examining not just the forged loan documents but the entire conspiracy. The coordinated harassment, the employee bribery, the fraudulent trust scheme, everything had been laid out in a detailed indictment. Duke's outdoor goods company had collapsed entirely. The corporate espionage charges were only part of his problems. Creditors had seized his assets, and bankruptcy hadn't protected him from criminal liability. He'd been arrested at his country club, led away in handcuffs in front of half of Charleston's business community. Marilee's pristine reputation had crumbled. The Charleston Post and Courier had covered the story extensively, detailing the coordinated family fraud scheme that had targeted a local businesswoman. Her membership in the Heritage Society had been revoked. Her invitations to charity boards had dried up. The woman who'd spent 60 years building her social standing had lost it all in a matter of months. Rowena sat in her office, reading the newspaper coverage with quiet satisfaction. The business page featured a story about her company's expansion. She'd used the disruption to restructure operations and had emerged stronger than before. Kasia knocked on the door and entered with coffee and a folder. Final court settlement came through. Harlan's agreed to pay full restitution for legal costs, plus damages for business interference. Total comes to $275,000. Can he pay it? Not immediately, but the court approved a payment plan. His wages will be garnished for the next 8 years. Rowena accepted the coffee and the folder. What about the criminal cases? Harlan's plea hearing is next month. His lawyer thinks he'll get 2 years in minimum security, plus 5 years probation. Duke's looking at more time. The corporate espionage charges carry heavier penalties. And Marilee? No criminal charges, but the civil case is proceeding. She's liable for conspiracy and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her lawyer wants to settle. Rowena nodded. The legal battles were winding down, but the real work was just beginning. 6 months after the courthouse victory, Rowena stood before the cameras at a business symposium in downtown Charleston. The banner behind her read, Women's Financial Empowerment Conference, sponsored by Rosewood and Iron Enterprises. Financial abuse doesn't always look like what you expect, she told the audience of 200 women. It doesn't always involve someone stealing your credit cards or emptying your bank account. Sometimes it looks like family members who think marriage gives them rights to your assets. Sometimes it looks like people you trust pressuring you to make decisions that benefit them at your expense. She clicked to the next slide in her presentation. The most important thing I learned is that documentation is everything. Keep separate accounts. Record every transaction. Document every conversation where someone pressures you about money. The paper trail will save your life. A hand went up in the audience. What if it's your own family pressuring you? Rowena's expression didn't change. Family members who steal from you aren't really family. They're thieves who happen to be related to you. Treat them accordingly. After the conference, she drove to her new office building. The Rosewood and Iron headquarters occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in the Arts District. The spice business had tripled in size over the past year, partly due to the publicity from the court case, but mostly because she'd been able to focus on growth instead of defense. Kasia met her in the lobby. Good conference. Very good. 3 dozen women signed up for the financial literacy workshop. 2 dozen more want copies of the guide. They rode the elevator to the top floor, where Rowena's office looked out over Charleston Harbor. The walls were decorated with photographs of her grandfather and framed copies of newspaper articles about women's financial rights. Speaking of the guide, Kasia said, the publisher wants to discuss a second printing. Sales have exceeded projections. Rowena smiled. Married, Not Owned had become an unexpected bestseller, a practical guide to protecting assets in marriage and recognizing financial abuse. The dedication read, To every woman who's been told that love means surrendering control of her life. There's one more thing, Kasia said, handing her an envelope. Delivery receipt from the Women's Financial Empowerment Foundation. Rowena opened the envelope. Inside was a thank you letter acknowledging her donation of $250,000 made in Harlan's name. The foundation provided legal aid and financial education to women escaping abusive relationships. He'll get the tax receipt next year, Kasia observed. From prison, I doubt he'll be able to use the deduction. They stood at the window, watching boats move across the harbor. The city spread below them, all history and tradition and carefully maintained appearances. Any regrets? Kasia asked. Rowena considered the question seriously. A year ago, she'd been married to a man she'd thought she loved. She'd had a smaller business and fewer responsibilities. Her life had been simpler, quieter, more contained. Now she was divorced, notorious, and running a multi-million-dollar enterprise that employed 40 people and influenced thousands more. She'd made enemies of her former in-laws and turned her personal trauma into a weapon against financial abuse. No, she said finally. No regrets at all. That evening, Rowena worked late in her office, reviewing expansion plans for the business. The spice company would open a second facility next year, and she was considering acquisitions in related markets. The foundation work was growing too. She'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country. 10 o'clock. She finally locked up and walked to her car. The parking garage was quiet, her footsteps echoing off concrete walls. As she reached her car, her phone buzzed with a text message, unknown number. You destroyed my family. I hope you're proud of yourself. Rowena deleted the message without responding. Someone, probably Marilee or one of Duke's friends, was still fighting the war they'd already lost. It didn't matter. She'd documented everything, and her security was excellent. She drove home through the historic district, past the house where she'd lived with Harlan, past Marilee's mansion with its dark windows and foreclosure sign. The city looked different now, like a stage set for someone else's life. Her new house was smaller, modern, designed for function rather than impression. She'd bought it with cash from the business expansion, and it belonged entirely to her. No mortgages, no co-owners, no one who could claim a right to what she'd built. Inside, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat at her kitchen table with the day's mail, bills, business correspondence, and an invitation to speak at a legal symposium on financial fraud prevention. She opened her laptop and began preparing her remarks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build what her grandfather had started and what she would continue to protect. The last signature on the day's documents was her own, strong, confident, uncompromising. Just like everything else in her life now.